My name is Robert Davis, and today I'm going to tell you the most painful and beautiful story of my life. A story that began on a Tuesday morning in Washington Square Park in New York City, when I was nothing more than a shadow of the man I once was. The sun was just rising behind the arch when I dragged myself to the concrete bench near the fountain. My clothes, a pair of jeans torn at the knees, and a shirt that had long forgotten its original color, reeked of nights spent sleeping in the open. My long, matted hair fell over my bearded face, hiding scars I preferred not to explain. At 49 years old, I was part of the over 580,000 Americans experiencing homelessness, a number that grew each day across our nation. The park began to come alive with the characteristic rhythm of New York mornings. Food cart vendors opened their stands, serving coffee and bagels. Office workers hurried past carrying their briefcases, and retirees came to feed the pigeons. I watched everything from that bench, trying to become invisible, as I had learned to do over the past 2.5 years. That's when I saw them approaching. There were 4 people, 2 middle-aged men wearing expensive suits, a well-dressed woman carrying a designer handbag, and a young man in workout clothes who seemed to be returning from a morning jog around the park. They were chatting animatedly about some topic when one of them noticed me. "Look at this," said the taller one, a bald man with a prominent belly, pointing discreetly in my direction. "It's barely morning, and there's already a bum taking up the bench." And the woman made a face of disgust. "How disgusting. There should be a law prohibiting these people from being here. Imagine children seeing this." The young man laughed loudly. "Dude, look at the state of this guy. When was the last time he took a shower? I bet it's been weeks." If you're enjoying this real and touching story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see the emotional ending. Their laughter echoed through the park like daggers. Each word was a stab at what little dignity I had left. I lowered my head, pretending not to hear, but my heart was racing. My breathing became heavy. "He's just a dirty beggar," continued the bald man, now speaking louder, as if I were deaf or an animal. "Probably a drug addict, right? Must be here because he spent everything on drugs." The second man, shorter and wearing glasses, shook his head in disapproval. "That's what happens when you don't want to work. Prefers to live like this, begging for money instead of getting a job. Lazy bum." My hand clenched into a fist. They didn't know. They had no idea who I had been before, what I had lost, the nights I had spent awake, crying over everything that was gone. They didn't know that I once wore suits too, carried leather briefcases, jogged through the same park on sunny mornings. The woman stepped back several more feet. "God forbid I touch him. He must have some contagious disease. Why doesn't the city do a clean-up of this area?" "Clean up?" repeated the young man, laughing. "Good one. There should be a real clean-up operation. Sweep all this trash out of here." Tears burned my eyes, but I couldn't cry. Not there, not in front of them. I had already lost so much: my house, my job, my family, my dignity. I couldn't also lose control of my emotions in front of those cruel strangers. The sun climbed higher in the New York sky, but everything seemed dark to me. Passers-by began to form a semicircle around the group, some laughing along, others just watching the spectacle of someone else's humiliation. I felt like an animal in a zoo, exposed for entertainment. "I bet he can't even read," provoked the bald man, getting closer. "These people are born stupid and die stupid. That's why they end up like this." That's when I felt something brush against my leg. I looked down and saw a medium-sized dog with brown and white fur, watching me with loving eyes. He was thin, clearly also a street dweller, but his eyes shone with an intelligence and sweetness that contrasted with the human cruelty around me. The dog came closer, sniffed my outstretched hand, and without hesitation lay down at my feet with a deep sigh, as if he had finally found his place in the world. "You gross!" screamed the woman. "Now there's a dirty dog too. This place has become a dump." But something had changed in the scene's dynamic. The dog looked at me with a recognition that made me tremble. His eyes seemed to say, "I know who you are, I remember." My trembling hand stroked his head, and he snuggled closer. In that moment, I felt a connection I had forgotten could exist. A pure loyalty, without judgments, without prejudices. The group of people seemed confused by the scene. The dog clearly knew me, showing genuine affection that contrasted with their assumptions about me. "That's strange," murmured the man with glasses. "The mutt seems to know him." I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. That dog had been my companion in other times, when my life was different, when I still had a house with a yard, a respectable job, a family who loved me. And now, there in the park, in front of those judgmental strangers, my old companion had found me again, as if he knew I needed him more than ever. The story I had never told anyone was about to be revealed. And it all began with the unconditional love of a dog who didn't care about my appearance, my smell, or my current situation. He simply loved me, and that would change everything. The dog continued lying at my feet, his calm and confident breathing contrasting with the whirlwind of emotions churning in my chest. Those brown eyes watched me with a familiarity that cut through my soul like a blade. It was Buddy, my Buddy. The same dog I had raised from a puppy in my house in Westchester County. "Buddy," I whispered his name, and his ears immediately perked up. He stood and placed his front paws on my knee, licking my face with a joy that made me crumble inside. The group of people around became even more intrigued. The bald man frowned, trying to understand the obvious connection between me and the animal. "How does this beggar know the dog?" asked the woman, her voice losing some of its previous arrogance. I took a deep breath and decided to break the silence I'd maintained for so long. My voice came out hoarse, trembling, but determined. "He's not just any stray," I began, my hand stroking Buddy's fur. "This is Buddy. He was my companion for 10 years. I found him when he was just a puppy, abandoned in a cardboard box in the rain." The laughter stopped. An uncomfortable silence took over the park. People looked at each other, confused. If this story is touching your heart, subscribe to the channel to follow each chapter of this emotional journey. "Impossible," murmured the young man. "You're making that up." I smiled sadly and looked into Buddy's eyes. "Buddy, sit," I ordered gently. The dog obeyed immediately. "Down." Again, the obedience was instant. "Give me your paw." Buddy raised his right paw, which I held lovingly. The group watched, speechless. 4 years ago," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "I was Robert Davis, senior software engineer at Goldman Sachs. I lived in a 4-bedroom house in Westchester, had a BMW in the garage, and Buddy here running around the backyard every day." The well-dressed woman took a step forward, her expression changing from disgust to uncomfortable curiosity. "I worked on developing trading algorithms for high-frequency transactions. I came home every day at 7:30 p.m. and Buddy would wait for me at the gate, wagging his tail exactly like he's doing now." My voice cracked. "My wife, Sarah, always complained that he loved me more than her." The man with glasses crossed his arms. "If you had all that, how did you end up like this?" The question I feared, the one that haunted me every night. I breathed deeply, feeling the warmth of Buddy's body leaning against my leg. "The financial crisis in tech hit like a tsunami in 2021, I began. The company started laying off employees, first the juniors, then the mid-levels. I, at 47 with a high salary, was an obvious target. I closed my eyes, remembering that fateful day. March 15th, 2022, a Tuesday, just like today, my boss called me into his office at 2 p.m. "Robert, you've always been an exemplary employee, but—" "But?" asked the bald man, his previous hostility replaced by something resembling interest. "But the company was facing financial difficulties. They cut 40% of the workforce that day. 18 years of work ended in a 10-minute conversation." Buddy sensed my distress and pressed his muzzle against my hand. That simple gesture gave me strength to continue. At first I thought it would be temporary. I had some savings, unemployment benefits. Sarah supported me, said we'd get through it together. Buddy didn't understand why I was always home, but he loved having my constant company. I paused to swallow the lump in my throat. The people around had moved closer, forming a smaller, more intimate circle. I looked for work for months, sent hundreds of resumes, went to dozens of interviews, always the same response. You're overqualified, or we're looking for someone younger. At 47, I was already considered too old. The young man in workout clothes lowered his head, seeming embarrassed by his earlier words. The savings ran out first, then unemployment benefits. Sarah had to handle all the house expenses alone with her teacher's salary. The pressure kept growing. Buddy licked my hand, as if trying to console me from the painful memories. We started selling things. First the BMW, then the furniture, then the jewelry I had given Sarah over the years. Each object sold was a piece of our life that was gone. The woman who minutes before had talked about cleanup now watched me with tears in her eyes. Sarah tried to be strong, but I could see her crying hidden in the bathroom. I could see how she looked at me, no longer with love, but with disappointment, with anger, as if I had chosen to be unemployed. My voice almost failed. Buddy felt the tension at home. He stopped playing, always stayed by my side, as if he knew I was falling apart inside. The silence in the park was absolute. Even the pigeons seemed to have stopped cooing. The final argument happened on a December night. Sarah came home after another double shift at work. She had taken extra classes to compensate for my lack of income. She found another collection notice on the table. I breathed deeply, preparing myself to remember the moment that changed everything. "I can't take this anymore, Robert," she said. "You don't even try anymore. You just sit there on the couch, depressed, waiting for things to fix themselves. I need a man, not another burden to carry." Buddy whined softly, as if remembering that terrible night. That's when I realized I hadn't just lost my job. I had lost my identity, my self-esteem, my reason for existing, and I was about to lose the only thing that still mattered to me, my family. The bald man cleared his throat uncomfortably. And then? What happened next? I looked at Buddy, who returned my gaze with that unwavering loyalty only dogs know. Then came the storm that threw me onto the streets. And the worst was yet to come. Buddy settled better beside me, as if he knew the most difficult part of the story was about to come. His ears moved nervously, catching every inflection of my voice. The group around had grown. Other people stopped to listen, forming a silent circle in Washington Square Park. The separation wasn't made official immediately, I continued, my hand automatically finding the spot behind Buddy's ear that he always loved me to scratch. Sarah said she needed time, that I should leave the house for a few weeks to think about life. The well-dressed woman pulled a chair from a nearby cafe and sat down, completely absorbed in the narrative. The bald man had lost all his initial arrogance. I went to live with my brother Mike in Queens, a 2-bedroom apartment where he'd been living alone since his divorce. Buddy came with me, of course. Sarah didn't even argue. She always said he was more mine than hers. I smiled slightly, remembering the first days at my brother's place. Mike tried to cheer me up, said it was a new opportunity, that I could start over. But I was in free fall, you know, like a building collapsing. Each day that passed, another floor of my life crumbled. The young man in workout clothes moved closer. "Did your brother help you?" "He tried. Mike was always generous. Let me stay in the guest room without charging anything, shared food with me, even found some freelance programming projects for me to try to get back on my feet." Buddy yawned and stretched, but didn't move from my side. It was as if he knew his presence was my only comfort at that moment. But depression is like a black hole. It sucks everything around it. I'd wake up in the morning with no desire to get out of bed. Buddy forced me to get up because he needed to go out, and that probably saved me from burying myself completely. This story shows how life can change quickly. If you want to see how it continues, subscribe to the channel. Mike started losing patience after 3 months, and I understand. Having a depressed brother and a dog occupying your space wasn't exactly what he had planned for his life. The man with glasses shifted nervously. "Did you fight?" "Not exactly a fight. It was more a painful conversation. Robert, you need to get moving, man. I've already set up 4 job possibilities for you, and you didn't go to any interviews. This can't go on. I stopped to watch a pigeon that had landed near my feet. Buddy observed it with interest but didn't move, an example of self-control that I had completely lost at that time. The truth is, I was afraid of another rejection, another humiliation. Every no I received was like confirmation that I was worthless. The woman discreetly wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. And your wife? Didn't she try to help you? Sarah would call occasionally. Cold, objective conversations. How are you? Fine. Did you get any work? Not yet. Okay. Click. Buddy sighed deeply, a sound that always moved me. It was as if he absorbed my sadness and tried to alleviate it with his simple presence. In June 2022, Mike met a woman, Jessica. A beautiful, intelligent, successful executive. Everything Sarah had been to me years before, and everything I no longer was to anyone. The bald man nodded his head, beginning to understand where the story was leading. Jessica started spending more time at the apartment. Dinner, movies, sometimes she'd sleep over, and I was the failed brother in the back room, with a dog, no job, no prospects. I closed my eyes, remembering the whispered conversations I heard through the thin walls. One night I heard Jessica talking to Mike in the kitchen. Honey, I understand he's your brother, but this can't last forever. How are we going to build our life together with him here? Buddy sensed my growing tension and pressed his body against my leg with more force. Mike tried to defend me. He's going through a rough patch. Soon he'll bounce back. But Jessica was direct. It's been 3 months, Mike. He doesn't even try anymore. And that dog... Our relationship can't start like this, sharing space with that. The young man grimaced. She said that, referring to you. To me and Buddy. For her, we were just obstacles to her happiness with my brother. I stroked Buddy's chest, where I could feel his heart beating strong and steady, a reminder that, at least to him, I still mattered. The next morning, Mike woke me up early. He had that expression I'd known since childhood, when he needed to do something he didn't want to, but knew was necessary. The park around had become quieter. Even the traffic seemed to have diminished, as if the entire city was listening to my confession. Robert, you need to understand my position, he said. Jessica and I are getting serious. She's moving in next month, and, well, you know that 2's company, 3's a crowd. I laughed bitterly. Of course I knew. I always knew. I just never imagined the day would come when I'd be the unwanted third in my own brother's life. Buddy licked my hand, his automatic gesture of comfort. Mike tried to soften it. It's not personal, bro. It's just that you need a push to get out of this. Staying here isn't doing you any good. And then came the question I dreaded. Do you have somewhere to stay? The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone knew the answer. I didn't. Sarah had made the divorce official the week before. My parents had died years ago. Friends. Well, it's funny how friends disappear when you have nothing to offer but problems. The woman whispered, and the dog. That's when I felt my heart completely shatter. Mike was clear. Jessica's apartment doesn't allow pets. Buddy can't stay. And then he made the suggestion that destroyed me. Maybe it's better to leave him at a shelter. A young dog like Buddy would surely find a family quickly. Buddy raised his head, looking into my eyes, as if he knew we were reaching the moment when we separated. I had 3 days to leave. 3 days to find a place for me and Buddy. 3 days to save the only relationship that still mattered to me in the world. But everyone there in the park already knew I had failed. After all, I had been alone on that bench for 2.5 years, and Buddy had only found me that morning. The most painful separation of my life was about to be revealed. Buddy stood up and put his head in my lap, as if sensing we had reached the most difficult part of our story. My hand trembled as I stroked his fur, remembering the last day we spent together before everything completely fell apart. I searched desperately for 3 days, I continued, my voice almost failing. I called every contact I still had on my phone. I looked for shelters, shared apartments, anywhere that would accept a 49-year-old unemployed man and a dog. The group around me remained in absolute silence. The well-dressed woman had moved so close she could see tears forming in my eyes. Reality is cruel. Nobody wants to rent to an unemployed person, much less with a pet. No proof of income. No pets. No pets. No pets. It was always the same answer. Buddy sighed deeply, as if remembering the tension of those final days in Mike's apartment. On the last night, when Mike had already packed my things in 2 suitcases, I sat on the living room floor with Buddy. He knew something was wrong. He stayed glued to me all night, as if he wanted to protect me from what was coming. The bald man cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. You had to take him to a shelter? I shook my head, feeling tears burning my eyes. Worse, much worse. If this story is moving you as much as it's moving me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how it ends. On the morning I had to leave, I called the only shelter in Manhattan that was still accepting animals. The woman was kind but direct. We have a 4-month waiting list for large dogs, and honestly, older dogs have little chance of adoption. Our euthanasia rate here is 70%. The young man in workout clothes swallowed hard. Euthanasia? If Buddy wasn't adopted within 90 days, he would be put down. Buddy whined softly, pressing his muzzle against my stomach. It was as if he remembered the desperation I felt at that moment. I couldn't do that to him. I couldn't condemn my best friend to death because I had failed in life. I breathed deeply, preparing myself for the most painful confession. So I made the most selfish and yet most loving decision of my life. I decided to abandon him somewhere he would have a chance to survive. The silence in the park was sepulchral. I Googled, best places to abandon dog New York City. What kind of search is that? What kind of person had I become? My voice trembled violently. I found an article saying that large parks with foot traffic were better. People who walk their dogs sometimes adopt abandoned animals. It was a chance. Buddy climbed onto the bench and lay beside me, his warm body against mine. It was exactly what he used to do when he saw me sad at home. I chose Central Park, a Sunday morning, July 24th, 2022, the sunniest day and the darkest day of my life. The woman whispered, "How could you do that?" I took him on what seemed like our last walk. Buddy was happy, wagging his tail, sniffing everything along the way. He didn't know it was goodbye. I closed my eyes, reliving every second of that horrible moment. We got to the reservoir, where there were always families having picnics. Buddy ran to the water like he always did. He drank, played, came running back to me with that smile only dogs know how to make. The bald man cleared his throat, visibly moved. I slowly took off his leash. Buddy thought it was playtime, started jumping around me. "Sit, Buddy," I commanded. He obeyed, looking at me with those trusting eyes. My voice became a whisper. I petted his head for the last time. "Hey, you're a good boy, Buddy, the best dog in the world. Forgive me for this." He licked my hand, not understanding why I was crying. Buddy now pressed his entire body against me, as if he wanted to console me from the painful memory. I started walking backward, slowly. Buddy followed me for a few steps, but stopped when he realized something was strange. I stood there, looking at him from a distance. He looked back at me, confused. The young man asked softly, "Did he try to follow you?" "Yes." He started running toward me, but I turned around and ran like a coward. I heard him barking behind me, a desperate, confused bark. It was the sound of a heart breaking. Tears flowed freely down my face now. I ran out of the park without looking back. If I had looked back, I would have returned, and then we both would have died on the streets together. Buddy climbed even higher on the bench and began licking my face, exactly as he used to do when he saw me crying at home. I spent 2 weeks secretly returning to the park, hiding behind trees, just to see if he was okay. I saw him wandering alone, thin, confused, looking for me. Once, a family almost adopted him, but he ran away when they tried to put a leash on him. He was still waiting for me to come back. The woman was crying openly now. "And you never went back?" "After a month, I couldn't see him in the park anymore. I thought maybe he had been adopted or that he had died." Both possibilities destroyed me equally. Buddy was now practically on top of me, as if he wanted to erase that painful memory with his present love. I've lived on the streets since then. 2.5 years sleeping on benches, begging for money, being humiliated by people like you humiliated me this morning. And every single day, without exception, I thought about Buddy. I wondered if he hated me, if he understood why I abandoned him, if he was still alive. I looked into my dog's eyes, who returned my gaze with that unconditional loyalty. Until this morning, until he showed up here and showed me that despite everything, he still loves me, still forgives me, still recognizes me as his owner. The bald man whispered, "He never forgot you." No, and I never forgave myself. Buddy wouldn't stop licking my face, as if he wanted to clean away all the tears and all the pain that had accumulated over these 2.5 years. His front paws rested on my chest, and he looked into my eyes with that intensity only dogs can convey, pure love, without judgment, without resentment. "He never abandoned you," said the woman, her voice choked with emotion. "Even after you, even after the park, he never gave up on you." I nodded, unable to speak. The group around me had completely changed. The same faces that looked at me with disgust and contempt an hour before now saw me with compassion, understanding, and even admiration for the courage to tell my story. The bald man came closer and, to my surprise, crouched beside the bench. "Robert, I need to apologize to you. The things I said, they were cruel and unfair." Buddy turned toward him, studying his face with that canine curiosity. Then he did something unexpected. He approached the man and sniffed his extended hand. "He's forgiving you too," I observed with a weak smile. Buddy was always better than humans at sensing people's hearts. The young man in workout clothes sat on the ground in front of me. "Man, I never imagined that. I mean, you really looked like... Sorry, but it's hard to imagine you were a software engineer." I understood perfectly. 2.5 years on the streets completely transform a person. My unkempt beard, my long, dirty hair, my torn clothes. I barely recognized myself when I saw my reflection in store windows. "The street changes everything," I explained. "Not just appearance. It changes how you see the world, how the world sees you. You learn that dignity is a luxury not everyone can afford." This real story is touching the hearts of many people. If you want to be part of this journey, subscribe to the channel. Buddy decided he had given enough attention to others and returned to my lap, curling up like he was a puppy again. "But how did you survive on the street?" asked the man with glasses, genuinely interested. "I mean, without experience, without knowing the rules." I laughed bitterly. "The first weeks were horrible. I didn't know where to sleep safely, where to get food, how to avoid the police. I got beaten up by other homeless people for trying to sleep in their territory. I was robbed 3 times. I stroked Buddy's ears while continuing. "But I learned that the best place to panhandle is churches on Sundays. I learned that some restaurants throw away good food after 11 p.m. I learned that public libraries are sanctuaries during the day. You can use the bathroom, wash your face, even sleep a little in the back chairs." The woman shook her head, impressed. "It must have been terrible. The worst wasn't the hunger or cold," I confessed. "It was the invisibility. You realize how people avoid looking you in the eyes, how they cross the street to avoid passing near you. You become a living ghost." Buddy yawned and settled more comfortably, completely relaxed. It was surreal how he had instantly returned to trusting me, as if the 2.5 years of separation were just a nightmare that had finally ended. "And you, Buddy?" I asked, scratching his neck. "How did you survive all this time?" As if understanding my question, Buddy got up and trotted over to an elderly woman who had stopped to listen to the story. She smiled and petted him with familiarity. "I know this dog," she said. "He shows up at my newsstand almost every day for the past 2 years. Always polite, never aggressive. I give him leftover sandwiches sometimes." My heart warmed. Buddy had found his own survival strategies. A man in a deli uniform approached the group. "That's Buddy. He always stays by the door of my deli on Tuesday mornings. Never begs aggressively, just sits there with those sweet eyes. Impossible not to give him at least a piece of pastrami." Others began to speak. He sleeps under the awning of the pharmacy on 4th Street. I always see him drinking water at the fountain in Union Square. Once he helped me when I was being mugged, barked until the thief ran away. I realized Buddy had built his own support network in Lower Manhattan. He hadn't just survived, but had won the hearts of several people in the neighborhood. "You see," I said to the original group that had humiliated me, "Buddy did what I couldn't do. He maintained his dignity, earned people's respect, created bonds. He's better than me in every way." The bald man shook his head vigorously. "No, Robert, you're wrong. Buddy is loyal. Buddy is loving. But you had the courage to give up the only thing you loved, to protect it. That's not failure. That's love." His words hit me like lightning. In 2.5 years, no one had told me that my decision could have been seen as an act of love, not cowardice. Buddy returned to me, carrying in his mouth a piece of bread someone had given him. He dropped it in my lap and looked at me expectantly. "He wants to share the food with you," observed the woman, moved. "After everything, he still wants to take care of you." I broke the bread in half and offered part to Buddy. He ate delicately, without hurry, enjoying the moment of being together again. "You know what's most incredible?" I asked the group. "Buddy found me exactly when I needed him most. This morning, when you were humiliating me, I was thinking about giving up on everything, about surrendering completely." The young man frowned. "Give up how?" I breathed deeply. "There's a bridge nearby. I was thinking about ending all of this. The pain, the humiliation, the loneliness." The silence was absolute. But then Buddy appeared, as if he knew, as if he came to save me once more. Buddy rested his head on my shoulder, sighed deeply, and snuggled against me. "And now?" asked the woman. "What are you going to do now?" I looked at Buddy, who returned my gaze with that unwavering confidence. Now we're going to start over. Together." Buddy was asleep in my lap when I felt a hand touch my shoulder. It was the bald man, who had stepped away from the group for a few minutes and now returned with a determined expression on his face. "Robert," he said, "my name is Frank Martinez. I'm HR Director at Goldman Sachs. I just made some calls." I looked at him without understanding, trying not to wake Buddy with my movement. "I reached out to your old company, spoke with 2 of your former colleagues. Everyone spoke wonders about your work. One of them, Senior Engineer David Chen, said you were one of the best professionals he's ever worked with." My heart raced. I hadn't heard David's name in 2.5 years. The well-dressed woman approached too. "I'm Dr. Patricia Williams, attorney. I'm willing to help you with any legal matters you need to resolve. Documents, certifications, whatever's necessary. No charge. If you're moved by this incredible turnaround, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the ending of this story." The young man in workout clothes had also returned with a plastic bag in his hands. I bought shampoo, soap, a razor, and a new shirt at the pharmacy down the street. I figured, well, if you're going to have a job interview, you need to look presentable. Tears began flowing down my face again, but this time they were tears of hope, not despair. Frank continued, "We have an opening for senior software engineer. Starting salary is $95,000, but with your experience, it can grow quickly. The interview can be tomorrow if you want." Buddy woke with my movement and looked at me, immediately sensing the change in my energy. His tail began to wag slowly. I don't know what to say," I stammered. "You don't even know me. An hour ago you were humiliating me, and now we know who you really are," said Patricia. "Not by the clothes you wear or where you sleep, but by the character you demonstrated, by the courage to tell your story, by the way you love this dog, by the dignity you maintained even after losing everything." Buddy got up and went to Frank, sniffing his extended hand. Then he did the same with Patricia and the young man, as if approving each person offering to help us. "And Buddy?" I asked, concern evident in my voice. "I can't work if I don't have somewhere to leave him. I won't abandon him again." Frank smiled. "Our company has a pet-friendly policy. Employees can bring their pets to the office as long as they're well behaved. And from what I've seen, Buddy is a gentleman. As if understanding he was being praised, Buddy sat elegantly and offered his paw to Frank, who shook it solemnly. The man with glasses, who had been quiet for a while, approached. "I'm John. I have a real estate office nearby. I have a small apartment, 1 bedroom and living room, but clean and furnished. You can stay there the first month without paying anything, just to get reorganized." It was hard to process so much generosity. People who had hated me 2 hours before were now literally rebuilding my life. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, genuinely confused. Patricia answered, "Because we realized we could be us tomorrow. Life is fragile, Robert. A divorce, a layoff, an illness. Any of us could be on this bench in a matter of months." Frank nodded. "And because you taught us something important today, that how we treat people in vulnerable situations says more about us than about them." Buddy came to me and put his head on my knee as if saying, "See, I knew people were good deep down." "There's one condition," said John with a smile. "I want to know Buddy's complete story. A dog that survives 2.5 years on the streets of Manhattan and still maintains this education and loyalty is a hero." Buddy wagged his tail vigorously, as if agreeing he was indeed a hero. I stood up from the bench for the first time in hours, Buddy jumping beside me. "So, shall we begin?" "Let's begin," confirmed Frank. "First thing is you take a shower and shave. Then we go to my company. You'll see the office and we'll talk about the position." As we walked through the park, Buddy trotting happily among us, I noticed other people stopping to observe our small group. The story had spread, and many smiled and nodded approvingly. An elderly man approached and handed me a $20 bill. "For you to buy a good meal today. God bless you both." A young delivery driver stopped his bike. "Dude, I heard your story over there. I'm from an NGO that helps homeless people. Here's my card. Anything you need. Paperwork, social services, psychological support. Just call." Buddy was euphoric with all the positive attention. He greeted each person who approached, as if presenting his recovered dad to the entire neighborhood. "You know what's most incredible?" I said to the group as we walked. 2 hours ago, I was invisible to everyone. Now suddenly I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm treated like a human being again. "You always were a human being," corrected Patricia. "We just lost the ability to see that." Buddy never lost it. I looked at my dog, walking proudly beside me, and realized he had been my guardian angel all this time. Even when I abandoned him, even when I thought I was losing him forever, Buddy continued protecting me in a way I was only now beginning to understand. This incredible transformation was only possible thanks to the power of unconditional love. If you believe stories like this can change the world, subscribe to the channel. 6 months later, I was back in my apartment, not the same as before, but a new one, smaller, simpler, but ours. Buddy had perfectly adapted to the routine of going to work with me every day. At Goldman Sachs, he became the official mascot, receiving affection from all employees and even participating in meetings, always well-behaved by my side. My work as an engineer had returned full force. Frank hadn't lied about my references. David Chen not only confirmed my technical competence, but recommended me for bigger projects. Within 8 months, I received a promotion. But the most important thing wasn't the money or professional recognition. It was looking at Buddy every night, lying in his new bed next to mine, and knowing we would never be separated again. Sarah called once, 3 months after my return to work. She had heard about my recovery through mutual acquaintances. The conversation was brief, civilized but distant. She was engaged to another man, a successful lawyer. She wished me luck and hung up. I felt no anger or sadness, only gratitude for freeing me to find my true home, which had always been beside Buddy. Mike also reconciled with me. He and Jessica got married, but the experience of almost losing his brother forever made him rethink his priorities. Buddy now has regular visits to their house on Sundays, and Jessica, who initially didn't like animals, fell completely in love with him. If this story is touching your heart as much as it touched mine to live it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with those you love, because in the end, it's love that saves us. But the most profound change was in how I saw the world. Every day on my way to work, I pass through Washington Square Park. When I see people experiencing homelessness, I stop, talk, offer real help, not just coins, but information about jobs, shelters, social services. Buddy always accompanies me in these conversations, and it's incredible how his presence calms and humanizes these encounters. I created a small NGO with Patricia and Frank called Second Chances, specialized in helping people who lost everything to rebuild. We've already helped dozens of families reconstruct their lives. Buddy is our official ambassador. His story of loyalty and forgiveness inspires everyone who knows our cause. One night, 8 months after our reunion, I was sitting on the couch watching TV with Buddy lying beside me. I looked at him and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me, boy." Buddy raised his head, looked into my eyes with that canine wisdom that needs no words, and licked my hand once. Then he lay back down, sighed deeply, and closed his eyes with the serene smile of someone who had fulfilled his mission. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, because these are the stories that really matter and transform lives. Today, when I tell my story to other people, and I tell it frequently at conferences, support groups, to anyone willing to listen, I always end with the same reflection. Buddy taught me that true love doesn't give up, doesn't judge, doesn't abandon. It simply waits, with infinite patience, until we can be worthy of it again. And every night when I brush my teeth before bed, I look in the mirror and see not the dirty beggar I was, nor the successful engineer I used to be, but the man I became. Someone who learned that our true identity isn't in what we possess, what we do, or even what we lose. It's in the capacity to love and be loved, and in that, thanks to Buddy, I became rich again. Buddy yawns, stretches, and comes to lie at my feet as I finish writing our story. His eyes shine with that peace only those who found their place in the world know. And I know that, no matter what the future holds for us, we'll face it together, forever.